that the topic? Because it doesn't really seem like a... Okay. I mean, that's not really a topic either. Usually these are in sort of a essay question kind of format. Okay, that's actually somehow worse. Are you okay? Okay. Well, do you want to talk about it? Yeah, whenever you feel comfortable, news window, I'll be here, screaming into the void. Hey, you know what? We can do those topics. I think we can do all those topics. Just bring back the last one. Okay, now I just need to figure out who this Adam Smith is. Skeleton Samurai. Use your mystical powers to summon this Adam Smith. Yes, now peer into his mind with your sight beyond sight. Ask him what the most important event in all of history is. The discovery of America and that of a passage to the East Indies by the Cape of Good Hope are the two greatest and most important events recorded in the history of mankind. In the short period of between 2 and 3 centuries, which has elapsed since these discoveries were made, it is impossible that the whole extent of their consequences can have been seen. What was that accent all about? Also, what is he talking about? Why is the world so unequal? And racist? Why so racist? Also, economic history according to Adam Smith. Subtitle, Gold, Caravels, and Slavery. The year was 1415, just on the cusp of the Age of Discovery, which I was surprised to find out is not a euphemism for puberty. The young kingdom of Portugal was about to raid the Marinid Sultanate, one more battle in a holy war that had raged for 700 years. Wait, 700 years? That seems made up. How have I never heard of that before? The Reconquista? Oh, there's a holiday memorializing it that's celebrated in parts of Spain to this day? I bet that's fun. What does that look like? Cool, totally cool and normal, okay. The Muslim world is important in this story, not just because of the centuries-long war for the control of Iberia, but because this is a story about trade. And trade in the early 15th century was centered, here. Thinking about maps. World trade in the early 15th century was defined by 4 major trade networks: the Silk Road, the Trans-Saharan Network, the Indian Ocean, and the Mediterranean. All of these networks met in the ports of the southeastern Mediterranean, at that time controlled by the Mamluk Sultanate. Gold from Africa, silks from China, spices from India, and innumerable other goods all flowed through this region. The Venetians and the Genovese, at that time the most powerful merchants in Europe, transported these goods on the last leg of their journey to the markets of Portugal and other European kingdoms. In return for these exotic foreign goods, Italian city-states traded European wares like silver, woolens, and slaves, which, listen, there's a lot of slavery in history, and I'm going to be talking about it, which is complicated, both emotionally and politically. But I think we'll get through it. Just remember, slavery, it's the worst thing that people do. I don't really know what else to tell you. Anyway, trade between Europe and the rest of the world was not balanced. Silver was flowing out of Europe, and European silver mines could not keep up with demand. Arguably, as a result, the early 15th century was part of a period called the Great Bullion Famine. Speaking of Portugal, the year was 1415. Did I already say that? And Portugal was locked in battle with the Muslim world. Did I already say that too? In fact, Portugal had been locked in battle with the Muslim world from the moment it was born. Going all the way back to the Kingdom of Asturias, the Catholic kingdoms of Iberia had defined themselves as holy warriors, engaged in an apocalyptical struggle between good and evil. The patron saint of Asturias was Santiago Matamoros, Saint James the Muslim Slayer. He remains a patron saint of Spain to this day and has a sizable city in Mexico named after him. 500,000 people live in Muslim Slayer, Mexico. In many ways, one can think of this region as the birthplace of the Crusades. In fact, when Pope Urban II declared the First Crusades to the Holy Land in 1096, he specifically exempted those kingdoms already fighting a holy war in Iberia.
Hey everybody, we are going to Jerusalem, okay?
Wait,
Not you, Ramon, you're cool. Keep doing what you are doing.
Sweet.
Do I have soup on my face?
No. Back in 1415, a sexy young Portuguese prince named Henrique had just become a hero in that same holy war. Henrique had distinguished himself in the naval conquest of Ceuta, a feat for which he would be knighted. For the man who would one day be known as Henry the Navigator, this naval invasion would define his life's work. Henrique would devote himself to the pursuit of Portuguese naval exploration. And the result of this work was the development of new sailing and navigation technologies. Under Henrique, the Portuguese developed a faster, more maneuverable warship, the Caravel, whose triangular sails allowed sailing close to the wind. Portuguese sailors had access to state-of-the-art Venetian maps and systematized the use of a maritime astrolabe and magnetic compass for navigation. Using these tools, Portuguese sailors were able to land in both the Azores and Madeira. Before Henrique, Bojador was the edge of the Portuguese known world, the Cape of Fear. It was thought that the coastal winds would strand any ship that ventured beyond it. But using state-of-the-art navigation techniques, Portuguese captain Gil Eanes was able to sail past Bojador and return to Portugal by a long looping route into the open ocean, the Volta do Mar. Henrique wasn't just doing all of this sailing for nothing. He was doing it for money, and he needed to pay for these voyages somehow. He had loans from Italian bankers, and he was gambling on finding something worth enough to justify funding these expeditions. Discovering islands in the Atlantic, previously unknown, was certainly a boon for his reputation, but land alone would not make Henrique rich. No, what would make him rich was finding human beings to enslave. That would bring Henrique both money for his creditors and the official recognition of the Catholic Church. In 1441, Portuguese captains captured slaves in Mauritania to be sold in Lisbon. By 1460, over 20,000 slaves would be taken from West Africa to Portugal, and Henry would pocket 20% of the profits from their sale. The Casa de Guinea, formed under Henry's guidance, was the organization that oversaw this business. Trade, organizing voyages, building ships, all of it was under the control of one state-owned company. But this company was not just concerned with earthly matters. These explorations were an extension of the Reconquista, and Henrique himself was the Grand Master of the Military Order of Christ. As it says in the papal pronouncement Dum Diversas, "We grant you by these present documents, with our apostolic authority, full and free permission to invade, search out, capture, and subjugate the Saracens, pagans, and any other unbelievers and enemies of Christ, wherever they may be, as well as their kingdoms, duchies, counties, principalities, and other property, and to reduce their persons into perpetual servitude. The Casa de Guinea was not just a money-making operation, it was a holy war for profit, a slave trading concern sanctioned by the Catholic Church. As Portuguese historian Diego Cauta wrote, "The kings of Portugal always aimed in this conquest of the East at so uniting the two powers, spiritual and temporal, that the one should never be exercised without the other." Let's talk about slavery for a minute. Remember, slavery, it's the worst thing that people do. Then you freeze the frame. Anyway. Indentured servitude, captive labor, forced marriage, serfdom, all of these are types of unfree labor. Chattel slavery is a specific type of unfree labor, wherein an enslaved person can be owned and traded as property. To complicate matters further, the practice of chattel slavery itself varied widely across cultures. The type of labor enslaved people were forced to do and the social and material conditions they endured were not all the same. Both the Portuguese and their divine foes in the Muslim world had systems of religiously ordained slavery, but there were several important differences between the two. Enslaved people in Portuguese society were likely to be engaged in productive work, like agriculture or mining, whereas in the Muslim world, enslaved people were more likely to be engaged in military, domestic, or sexual labor. Listen, just to be clear, slavery bad. Slavery always bad. In fact, all unfree labor is bad. But just stay with me, because the particulars matter. The other important distinction is the functionally racialized nature of Portuguese slavery. In the Muslim world, as in the Roman world before them, slave status was not tied to any one skin color or racial category. In part because the Church had given Portugal the divine authority to enslave beyond Bojador, enslaved people in Portugal were almost exclusively African, mainly West African. As a result, the concept of slavery took on a specific racial meaning in Portuguese culture. By the end of the 15th century, this peculiar circumstance had closely linked the concepts of slavery and blackness. The term as both an indicator of skin color and slave status originates from this specific historical circumstance in Portugal. And that's where the N-word comes from. Not from the Greeks or the Romans or the Bible, but from the 15th century Portuguese. It's also where the concept of plantation slavery comes from, but we'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, where were we? Henrique! From his first foray across the Straits of Gibraltar, Henrique had expanded the Portuguese known world, beyond Bojador and all the way to Sierra Leone. And then he died. But the company he founded would live on. 11 years after Henrique's death in 1471, a Portuguese fleet sails to what is now Ghana to found Elmina, a figurative gold mine, which also happens to be close to a literal gold mine. It was a defensible port with access to gold, ivory, spices, and, here it is again, a steady supply of enslaved people. Elmina became the center of the slave trade for centuries after that, exporting tens of thousands of human lives for profit through these still existing dungeons. And it's now the sister city to Macon, Georgia. True story. The system of slavery anchored in Elmina became the backbone of a new and wildly profitable economy for the Portuguese. As the Portuguese Empire expanded into the Atlantic, slaves were exported to plantations in new Portuguese colonies like the Azores, Madeira, and Brazil, beginning the Atlantic slave trade. West African gold, along with revenue from spices, enslaved people, and plantations, cemented the importance of naval exploration and the Casa de Guinea in the Portuguese Empire. This influx of gold and valuable commodities even begins to turn the bullion famine in Europe. The company founded by Henrique to oversee his naval business had now become a powerful ally to the crown. Henrique's lifelong gamble on naval warfare paid off, and it paid off big. But Elmina was just the beginning. Using Elmina as a supply point, Casa de Guinea's ships under the command of Bartholomew Diaz would round the Cape of Good Hope in 1488, a step that would eventually lead to India and beyond. There, the Casa de Guinea would gain access to many more spices, like cinnamon and black pepper, crops as valuable as gold. The Casa de Guinea became the Casa de India, the Portuguese India Company, the original global corporation. It is difficult to overstate how impactful the Portuguese India Company was. Prior to the age of exploration, Portuguese royal revenue came largely from nobles, who in turn got it from land taxes. It had the same general feudal structure as most kingdoms. But with the Casa de India, the Portuguese had shifted the paradigm. They had an effective monopoly on trade with the largest economies in the world at that time. Banks could loan money to the Casa for expeditions and expect huge returns on their investment in valuable imported goods. Jacob Fugger, in his time the richest man in Europe, made much of his fortune trading copper for Indian goods. The Portuguese court swelled with merchants and administrators, all seeking to make their fortunes. The Casa de India turned Portugal from a small landowning kingdom into an economic powerhouse. And their Spanish neighbors wanted in on the action. In 1492, the newly unified Kingdom of Spain joins in the race for gold. After Columbus's initial landing in what is now the Bahamas, the Spanish crown asked the also Spanish Pope for legal rights to lands in the West, just as Henrique and the Portuguese had secured rights to land south and east of Bojador. So, in 1493, Pope Alexander VI, aka Rodrigo Borgia,
Academy Award winner Jeremy Irons is Rodrigo Borgia.
Yes, that Rodrigo Borgia, released the papal bull Inter Cetera, giving explorers the right to claim land by planting a flag on it. He then split the world between the kingdoms of Portugal and Spain in the Treaty of Tordesillas, all while presumably having lots and lots of weird pope sex.
One of the most shocking and scandalous stories ever told.
Luckily for Columbus, but unluckily for the local population, the second place Columbus landed contained recoverable sources of gold. By 1501, Spanish colonists forced native Tainos to extract that gold, even as smallpox was working its way through the population. By 1503, colonists began importing slaves from Africa to work claims alongside conscripted Taino labor. In 1516, the first sugar mill in the New World was milling sugar from slave plantations, while the Portuguese were establishing choke points on Indian Ocean trade routes in the early 1500s. Spanish conquistadors began plundering the Americas, all under the control of the Spanish counterpart to the Portuguese India Company. And even though conquistadors never found the mythical golden city of El Dorado in South America, they did find a lot of gold to plunder. The Aztec Empire and the Incan Empire both fell to Spanish forces, and the smallpox that followed devastated what political power remained. In 1545, the Spanish would find silver at Potosi. A lot of silver, like too much silver, like a problematic amount of silver. By the end of the 1500s, silver from Potosi and gold from Ghana, the Americas, and elsewhere caused Europe to go from a bullion famine to a bullion glut. Gold and silver flooded into Europe via the Iberian Peninsula, causing the value of silver to fall in relation to other goods. The influx of bullion from these colonial sources was so great that silver prices remained low in Europe up until the time Adam Smith was writing The Wealth of Nations in 1776. What? No, capitalism won't exist until much later. This is like early mercantilism and the beginning of colonialism. I just went through like 200 years of history and there's so much more ground to cover. Okay, I'm getting there. Okay, just ask yourself this question. Why does Adam Smith think that the establishment of these shipping routes, undertaken by two different kingdoms, are the most important events in history? Well, without these events and the organizations they created, and without the material change they created, capitalism as we know it could not exist. These two companies upended the world economic order. Now Portugal had become the middleman for Asian and African goods coming into Europe, just the way that the Levant had been the middleman when Henrique fought his first battles. Spain was absorbing the glittering spoils of the New World and began trading New World goods never before seen in Europe or Asia. Though the Mamluk Navy tried to reassert control over Indian Ocean shipping routes in 1509, and the Ottomans tried again in 1538, the massively valuable Indian Ocean trade would remain under Portuguese control for over a century. The center of trade had shifted, and the wealth that came with it caused the flourishing of a golden age in Iberia. The model Henrique developed in the 15th century now controlled a global economy in the 16th century. Bullion, caravels, and slavery had become the basis of a new type of society, with a new arrangement of power. They served as the glue which united a network of merchants, bankers, and the landed nobility to mutually benefit from colonial exploitation. These are the roots of the capitalist system and the modern world as we know it. The Portuguese company and the Spanish company. The template for all companies that follow and for capitalism itself. In 1580, both of these companies fell under the control of one very large-jawed royal family, the Habsburgs. But we'll have to get to that on part 2 of this series. Coming up on part 2, stocks, Protestants, and slavery. Now, news window, I'm here if you want to talk. I'm here if you don't want to talk. I'm just here, Okay, I can see that you're not happy, but do you want to tell me what exactly is bothering you? I get that. I mean, this whole situation in the Ukraine and global warming and what seems like an eternity of COVID. I get it. We're all frazzled, which is a polite way of saying we all have undiagnosed mental health issues. I have seen that. Okay, I get where you're going with this. I agree. Thank you for being honest with me about your feelings. I hear you, and I love you. It's going to be okay. I'm glad we talked. I'm always glad we talked. Hey, what's the deal with Adam Smith's accent? Oh, yeah, that tracks, actually. All right, bye.
Do I have soup on my face?
No.